Welcome to 20 Minutes of Clarity.
I'm your host, Jason Noble, and today with me is the man, Andy Merchant. But you also see, if you're watching on video, we have some special guests. Would you like to introduce yourself?
I'm Avery, a rising fifth grader.
All right.
I'm Ryan, a rising second grader.
That's right, right, the second grader. The topic of today is going to be about wealth transfer conversations. This is going to be, okay, you have the conversation while you're still around with your loved ones about what do they think is going to happen, what do they wish to happen, things of that nature. Andy and I have these conversations with our clients, and we help facilitate it. Now, as my children go ahead and head out because they're going to be going to a museum now, we're going to continue our conversation. Thank you so much for visiting us.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Appreciate it, Avery.
Bye.
Bye. Have a good day at the museum.
So cute.
Well, thank you. I mean, it's just, so think about why we go into work is to not only serve our clients and help them provide their families, right, a dream that they have, but it's also so that we could serve our own families. And they come into the office one day during the summer to see a professional and working environment. And those who know me, they know I like to have fun. So as far as professionalism, well, okay. But like, it's just a way for them to get exposure as a rising second grader and a rising fifth grader. So this is going to be something that they're going to be super stoked about. And if it brings them into the land of financial literacy, right? Mm-hmm. Wonderful starting point. But wealth transfer conversation, Andy, is not something that most financial advisors partake in. It can be very awkward. What I want us to do is have you explain what that even is, and then let's go into some of the nuts and bolts of actually how do we facilitate it, some of the techniques that we use. So if they're not working with us, they could take action on their own, or they could talk to their advisor about working with them on this. Or if they're interested in having this conversation with us, they could take that action. Before we go any further, if you like what we're talking about, hit subscribe so you could get access to further content that we have. Hit the like button. That definitely helps us. We appreciate that. Or go to clearpicturefinancial.com. Look at other content that we have, a lot of material that you could comb through. And then you can also even schedule a conversation with a qualified professional right there on our website. So, Andy, what is a wealth transfer conversation?
I mean, it's pretty much self-explanatory in a lot of ways, but it's having the conversation, right? It's having conversation around the intent of your wealth transfer plan. It's not reading your estate document necessarily. It's having that casual conversation around what your wills and wishes are. You know, and I always tell our clients, Jason, that start with your spouse, right? I mean, oftentimes, we could probably bring in both of our families in. Pretty common out there. One person in the household's probably pretty strong on the financial planning and doing all the bills and all this stuff we talk about. They're probably the ones that are like geeking out on our podcast information, right? Then you got the other one on the part of the family. It's like, whatever he or she says, right? They don't want to get involved. So if you're like my spouse, my wife, she's like, I don't even know where to log in. So starting there, having a conversation with your spouse or your other significant other who has access to it, because you got to be on the same page, right? That just gives you clarity around the intentions that you both have, making sure that it's aligned appropriate. So I think it's just really about that. And then from there, together, you just start to figure out, okay, what is it that we need to present or to discuss with the other beneficiaries, right? That'd be another really important person to have a conversation with so that they understand it. I don't mean go into detail. Like, you don't have to say to your son or daughter, all right, or your children or your beneficiaries, hey, we've got X amount of dollars in the bank. We want you to do all this, right? Because I know that sometimes that's just not a lot of the traditional mindset ways that some of our viewers and listeners have. But that's okay. They understand it. You know, you have money. So I think it's important. Just have a conversation. That's all that it is. It's talk about your wishes, talk about your desires, have that really, really tough starting conversation every so often. If you weren't here tomorrow, how would you want your assets and your family wealth to kind of play out? That's the big question to start off.
The wealth transfer conversation here in the office is a 3-part process. The first part of the process is we take your existing estate planning documents, and we have a very sophisticated tool where we could break it down from 80 pages down to 4 pages. And it just simplifies what is going on within that estate planning document. So that right there is the first step. And then we then have the conversation with the couple. That's all part of the first step. It's like, okay, here's your 4-page report. Is this what you believe it should have been? Is this what you want to have happen? They say yes, or if they say no, we go back to the drawing board with their estate plan attorney. Let's assume they say yes in this. Then it goes into, even within an estate planning document, there's like, hey, we want this family heirloom to go to ABC. We want this family heirloom. We want the jewelry to go here. We want watches to go there, whatever the case may be. So we have that conversation. Then I go, okay, are you ready to have the wealth transfer conversation now with the beneficiaries? When we do that, if they're in person, I do ask the parents to not react. I want them to be as stoic as possible. Pretend to be a statue, right? Like, I don't want you to react. Because what I'm going to do is the children are going to be in the office. You're going to be there as well. You're going to be there to observe, to watch, learn, and listen. And the first thing I say to the children, I make sure they all have a drink, they're settled in. And I go, okay, let's get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Your parents are no longer with us. So for the next hour, they're dead. They're gone. You can't ask them any questions. You can't ask them what they think about something. Okay, let's get into low-hanging fruit. What are you guys going to do at the home? And I have the 3 or 2 children. Let's just assume in this case, because that was the most recent one, it was 3 of them. One wanted to keep the home and rent it out because it's a really good rental property, and they were like, this could make a lot of good money. And the other 2 wanted to sell it. Well, why do they want to sell it is because of their own personal finances, right? Why did one want to rent it? They didn't need the money. They just wanted to rent it. So then it became a question of, okay, you want to rent it. Will you be willing to buy your brother and sister out so that you could rent it and receive full and they could get their cash? And then you hear the conversation go a little bit deeper in that. Okay, so that's just a quick story, but that's the second part, is getting the beneficiaries. Then I let a week or 2 go by. I need the parents to kind of chew on this kind of an emotional experience, this roller coaster they went through. And that's a couple weeks later. That's a third step in going, okay, now that you heard the beneficiaries really talk through some of the stuff, do you feel like there's any adjustments or any gaps in the plan that we need to address now? So the whole process could take about a month and a half, but it's a rewarding process as we go through each one of those steps, so that there's transparency, there's decisions that could be made, there's conversations that we can have while the parents are still with us, and also incorporating where the beneficiaries are. So let's go into like the first step, right? We have a copy of their estate planning document. Andy, you and we could probably read that as well as most attorneys, just because of our experience with estate planning. But can you give us like a story of where what they wanted to have happen wasn't clearly outlined in the estate plan and that first step in the process?
Yeah, no, I'm doing one actually as we speak. And I find most of these, Jason, and this one is when they're coming from a blended family, right? A lot of times, because in this particular case, it's like, they've been married a while, they've combined assets, but they both brought in their own assets to the new marriage, and they both have their own children. So it's like, how do we protect our each of our own bloodline children, but also at the same time is that we've married in and we've been married for a while. So, it's getting kind of sticky on whose assets go where and who do they avoid and those kind of things. And so it's really about working through that conversation. Is really the biggest thing that we've done. Now we're in the middle of it. So it's when I got the document, to your point, for step 1 and reviewed it, I'm like, my first question was, tell me what your wishes are, right? That's kind of during our in discovery with the two, two head of the family in this case, or the wealth owners. And then that's when it cleared up. So our notes, we reviewed it, got the documents, reviewed the documents, and said, everything you wish isn't what this document currently says. So we need to have another conversation, right? So that's where those ones come up, as we identified what could potentially have disrupted family harmony pretty significantly, but we're able to catch it early and start working through it. Now it's just a matter of getting on the calendar.
Yes, and so when I've had that conversation, like, what are your wishes? What would you like to see happen in the event you both passed away? Most of the time, the way that the documents are written is covering what their wishes are, which is wonderful. That just reaffirms what the attorney did is in line with their expectations. Mm-hmm. It just provides them so much confidence into the process. Now I go a little bit granular, and then I'm going, okay, so tell me about some of these line items that you have a very exotic car that you want to make sure goes to your son. Okay, why is that important to you? Oh, okay, so because he helped you work on it, this and that. Okay, got it. Now, but you want the jewelry to go to your daughter. Nothing to like the daughter-in-law, and they're like, no, I'm going to keep that in the family. Okay, do you see how I'm just asking the questions, not to judge, but to understand? So we just go through like these different line items that they have, and I understand like their thought process, and then I go, okay, now ignore everything else. Let's just talk about the children. What kind of jobs do they have? What kind of jobs do their spouses have? Are they high income earners, or are they lower income? Or are they starving artists? Like, where are they at, right, on that scale? And then it's like, okay, now you really want to make sure everybody gets a third. Okay, let's just talk through that. If they get a third of your IRA, everybody gets a third of your IRA, this high income earner is not going to get the full third of that. They're going to have to pay 30-40% of it to taxes. While your other child that has more modest income, they're going to get a lot more of that third, right? So is there money that we could give to this couple that's going to be just better tax efficiency for them? And we could take more of the IRA and give it to this other child where they are still going to be in a low tax bracket. So then we also look at what it's going to be from taxes. And to get some thinking through the beneficiaries and maybe some adjustments that the attorney may not have thought of. Now, these attorneys, they do know what goes on with the money transferring, but how many incorporate the taxes that the children are going to pay? I don't see that too often, even with the best attorneys that are out there. That's something that they rely on us to deal with, the financial advisors, right? Or the accountants, right? So by having that conversation, though, then I'm getting the parents to already think. And I go, hey, when can we get the kids together? And it's interesting, like, and now in our society, there may be one child here. They usually have the grandchildren, right? And then the other two, they're spread out, right?
Yes.
So we just bring in whoever could come in, and the others come in a virtual setting. But the big thing that I ask the parents to do is to cállate la boca. In Spanish, that means quiet the mouth. That's the nice translation of what I just said. There you go, TT. I got some Spanish in there for us, okay?
There you go.
No, but what I'm getting at is be quiet. Don't make any knee-jerk reactions, because things will be said that you're not going to like. Very rarely have I ever seen a whole hour go through in the second part where we bring the beneficiaries in. Have I ever seen it just go super smooth? And those times that I've seen it go super smooth is they've already had the conversation before.
Mm-hmm.
What I find it to be interesting is when the beneficiaries bring in their spouses. Those daughter and sons-in-laws, they throw a curveball into every one of these conversations. and I laugh because I'm just thinking of all the stories that come where the beneficiaries, the children, they're copacetic about it. It's like one of the daughter-in-laws or one of the son-in-laws they're like, well, no, we got 3 kids and they only have 1. They kind of bring out that kind of topic, which I appreciate that they do it. It's just kind of funny. It's coming from an in-law and not from one of the primary beneficiaries. Mm-hmm. So then we have to have that kind of conversation. Now, as you could imagine, when someone starts pointing fingers like that, it could get highly charged and emotional. That's where, as a qualified professional, like, we're like, hey, no. This is where we just have these conversations today. Nothing's being decided, but it opens up the door of conversation. But what we see is the parents, they see that in-law have that kind of comment and they're going, okay, are they doing it for their children or are they doing it for themselves? Right? And is there anything that we need to do within the estate plan to secure it stays within a family bloodline versus going to, let's say, an in-law that all of a sudden divorces and now they want 50% of whatever the inheritance is?
Well, that's the big one.
How these conversations kind of roll into each other.
Yeah, well, that's what I was thinking. In the step process here, it's about clarifying intentions, right? That's the conversation. Which is then it connects to why are we doing that? Is that we want to optimize the wealth transfer because you can't optimize it after the fact. And then if you do those 2 things correctly, then you should be able to put yourself and your family in a position to minimize any family conflicts, right? I mean, we've seen families disrupted back in my trust days. We've seen families just completely stop talking over silverware. I mean, money does funny things, right? Money's funny, but it does things that don't there. So we've even done an exercise. What I tell clients, and maybe a message for today's listeners and viewers today, is if you think about your wealth, break it into 3 categories and have conversations. Let's even keep it even more simple there. Think about your financial assets, right? The assets that Jason, you were referring to there is like, you got to think about taxes, and who's going to receive that financial asset. If you've got some low basis stock that you've held forever, and maybe that's your charitable gift, have that conversation with the family that we have a charitable inclination and here's how we're going to do it, right? Then you've got on the other spectrum, you got the family assets. Those are the assets that if you have them that are off duty, like, hey, they're staying in the family. We're going to lock them up in a trust possibly, but these are family assets that are important to us as a family. And it's going to continue. Like I've had some clients, Jason, that the family will keep a piece of land, force it into a trust so that the family stays together, right? They keep using it and the way they do things. But then the middle one, this is a fun activity. I did this with my parents, but the personal assets, that's the point you're talking about. This is important to my relationship with my dad or my mom, right? Or whatever else. And we actually did for one of our trust clients, we gave all the kids different color sticky dots, right? Those little things that you use at a garage sale. Yep. And we said, no, go around the house and each of you get so much. It's a weird shopping thing, but they could, on the back of it, they could identify what they would prefer. Like my dad's got this old like chair that's rocking metal chair thing, table set. I mean, I could probably go buy one of these things for nothing, but you know what? It's been in my family with my dad. We've had countless conversations sitting on these rocking chair type things. And it's like, I keep telling him every time I'm around him, I want this. This is mine, right? And it's weird because I got to have a conversation if he's not there, but I want him to be very clear that's mine. so anyway, but it's if you break it down into those 3 buckets ahead of time and then organize your conversation around, hey, how am I going to best optimize the wealth transfer of a financial asset? Well, have the conversation of understanding what your kids' brackets are. If you don't have kids, you got to talk about who else is in your family that's going to get your assets, right? And then have your personal assets. And if anybody doesn't put a sticky dot, Jason, those are the things that went to the estate sale or the garage sale, or maybe we sold ahead of time. But that's my only little added nugget is break them into those 3 buckets and try to keep in-laws as far removed in the earlier stages as you possibly can, because to your point, they're not that we don't want them to be included. There's just a point of sisters and brother-in-laws and brothers and sister-in-laws. It just gets messy, and it's not worth the stress, and people won't do it.
Bake the cake with the core ingredients.
Yes.
You don't gotta get all fancy with it. Just bake the basic cake, right? That's good and everyone likes. And then make sure that there's like understanding and things of that nature. This is why the third step takes a little, like we just let time go a little bit and then we readdress the third step. It's like, okay, now that there's stickies on the back of the family heirlooms, now that we have the conversation with the children, is there anything that we got to go back to the drawing board on and make sure the estate plan reflects the work that we just did?
Mm-hmm.
And and I said the meeting with the children is an hour. We schedule an hour, and then I schedule an hour after that. So it's a 2-hour block on my calendar for this meeting. Because most times we get it done in 60 minutes. There's times that we go a little bit longer, and I got to make sure I have that flexibility. But there's also, it's a highly emotional thing for not just the parents and the children, but I find myself being struck with emotion on this.
Tissues are a key thing at the meeting.
Yeah, it's just like when you have a deep respect and care for your clients,
mm-hmm.
you know that there was things that were brought up in that conversation that hurt the husband or the wife or one of the spouse. You just know, and like they did all they could to just keep quiet and stay calm, right, as they weathered through that storm. And the thing that I just consider and I think through is, man, okay, they're going to have a tough couple of weeks before we meet again. Let me think how I could like reach out to them and just go, hey, I know you're going through a lot right now, thinking through what you just discussed. Just write it all down. Just write it down and just know, because we took this action, we're able to then be able to take action on getting it to where you want it to be. Could you imagine if you both passed away and then this happened? Right? What would that have left your family then? They get it. They understand. They know that we're going through this tough period just so that we could get on the other side and be where it needs to be.
Mm-hmm.
And then when life changes, it talks about this in the psychology of money. You and I see this every single day in our job. Like whatever we have today is going to be different than what we have tomorrow. He was like, in this interview, only 27% of respondents said that they will change in the next 10 years. And he goes, and if you just look back on 10-year increments in your own life, how much you've changed. Really?
Wow.
Only 27% said that things would change. Majority of people said things will stay the same. It's just not reality.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with estate planning. Things will change within the estate plan. But how do you safeguard as much as you possibly can so that when you do go to revisit, it's still a living, breathing document that is up to speed, not only with the dynamics of your life and your loved ones' lives, but also the dynamics of new laws and regulations that come out. What a cliffhanger. We went way past minutes, but that's a cliffhanger for you to kind of chew on. And as always, this is Jason Noble, Andy Merchant. You just listened to 20 minutes of clarity. It was 24 minutes this time. We appreciate you tuning in and have this conversation. Start the process. Hit subscribe, hit a like, go to clearpicturefinancial.com to learn more. Thank you so much.